Today, Wael Gharzeddine joins me. He is from Lebanon, born and raised in Lebanon. He's half Australian. He is the former coach of the Lebanese women's national team. He's done so much work for Atletico Mineiro, Chelsea, Barcelona, Fluminense, and so much more. And Wael, I welcome you to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you, Jamie.
Thank you very much. So we're going to talk about your career spanning in Australia and beyond. But go ahead and tell us what it was like growing up in your household. Because obviously you were born in Lebanon, but did you grow up in Australia? Tell us the story.
Yes, I was born in Lebanon. I finished the high school here in Lebanon, and then after the high school, done 1 year the compulsory service in the army, and after that I moved to Australia. Over there, where I studied, I started studying sports science, and then I moved into football coaching with the Australian FA. And after that, I've done my coaching courses with the Italian Coaching Association, the Dutch Football Association, and then I had a chance to do like a football coaching course from one of the instructor from Brazil, from CBF, who happened to be there in Australia, and he invited me to do further coaching courses over there. And this is where I start moving to Brazil every football season. That was actually the football season over there. It was the opposite of in Australia while I was in Australia. So, and then I had the chance to start working with Fluminense, Atletico Mineiro, and yeah.
Of course, those clubs that you've mentioned are really great clubs in Brazil and around the world. You mentioned that you did, compulsory army service. What was that like? Did that teach you a lot? And how did it help you later down the line?
Well, definitely, it will definitely teach you to change your perspective to your life, not to take things for granted, to appreciate what you had, the little details, the little things where you have at home, the friends that you can't see every single day when you want to, the situation when it happened that you feel that, okay, there is some certain conflict and your life is not guaranteed. So it changed your perspective. And this is where I said, okay, no matter what, I want to do something that I love in life. And this is where I start to think seriously to go back into football, because I was first as a player, but couldn't make it as a player for two reasons. I got so many injuries, and at the same time, by the time I was recovering, I didn't feel that I'm good enough to make it to the highest level, which I dreamed to be. And then I did my first coaching course in Lebanon. That was in 2000. It was organized by the German Football Association and the German German Olympic Committee. It was done in Lebanon, and this is where I felt I really I was into coaching more. Like I want to continue in this game.
Who got you into football then? Is it quite a big sport in Lebanon? Was it your parents that got you into it? Any siblings?
It's the number one sports in Lebanon. Football and basketball, they are majorly the number one sports. But it's you can say more of the my surroundings, environment, my friends, and when you have like a child heroes you look up to, this is where you start loving the game more, and they start inspiring you as well more to be part of this passion. But
Athletes who often come from really hot backgrounds. So, for example, Lebanon is a really hot country, right? There is a big difference between them and a player that might have grown up in England in terms of stamina, in terms of strength and physicality. What would you say is the main difference? Is it the strength? Is it the speed? What would you, if you put these two people together, what would you call better? What would you put on a better player? And also, what would be the difference?
Lebanon is it has a very Mediterranean climate where we have 4 seasons. So in the summer it's too hot, in winter it's too cold, and it lasts for 3 months. 3 months summer, 3 months winter, and in autumn and spring the weather is moderate. But the difference between the two is the over there in Europe and in England, they look at football as a career. Over here, they look at it as a hobby, and because players and youngsters in England, they have a big why. why they want to become professional players. Over here in Lebanon, the why is small for these players because it's not at the top level, let's say the first men's league, it's not fully professional. Okay, so and then when they look at the success of the national team, some parents will become demotivated to keep their talent kids in the game, so they pull them out in order just to become engineers, doctors, or lawyers. This is the cultural part. You look at the individual part, there is a big difference in the mindset, in the emotionally. The players in Europe and in England, they are stronger. So these factors plays a big role.
If you were in charge of Lebanon, how would you change football as a culture then? Is there not enough funding into the game? I mean, there's not really any major Lebanon players playing in Europe. So how would you change that? And would you want to change that?
Well, I'll share with you my experience with the women's football right now. Right now, the first thing, we're trying to commercialize the game in cooperation with UEFA and FIFA programs. So what we're trying to do, we're trying to restructure the league, make it more competitive, and in order to commercialize it and bring sponsors and just give the players financial incentives to stay longer in the game. Give them the chance to promote them to play in the Gulf or to go somewhere in Europe where they can play. So this way, once you create the pathway and you commercialize the league, you give reasons for more players and parents to believe in the sports, and this is where you make your pool of talent and you increase the number of participation. And after that, it goes back to the programs of the national team, where we are making sure that every national team are training around 50 sessions per season, and trying to as well use this part of the funding to support the club. But sometimes this funding, it should be what we're trying to do to be like conditional, that they have to meet certain criteria in order to have these funding. And part of it is the communication between the staff, both the staff at the club level and the national team level. So you keep track of the players, of their injury records, of their performance record. So I believe when these two things goes in parallel, you can have a better perform player. As part of the national team, the men's side, the problem starts with the junior level, because at the junior level you have, I'm sure you may find it in Europe as well, that coaches, they are there, some of the coaches, they are there for the wrong reasons, because they use coaching juniors as a stepping stone to move forward, but not because they are specialized in coaching juniors or coaching youth. So their first intention is the trophy that they will receive at the end of the season. And if you ask me how many trophy Barcelona under 15 or under 18 have won in the past 10 years, I have no idea, because no one talks about it. All what you want to see is, as a successful club, how many players you can develop to the first team. So once we have this mindset, I believe that you can the scouting and detection of talent identification, this perspective will change, and you'll be looking for players, what they can do when they are developed, when you work on them after 5 or 10 years, not what they are capable to do now. This will change. Of course, it will make a big difference. And the more you send the players and you develop players to play overseas, this way you bridge the gap between the level of players who are playing overseas and the players that you have here who are playing in the local league. And that's how the national team, I believe, starts to develop in a better way.
Is there a lot of support then for these children of juniors, boys or girls, in Lebanon? Is it quite a common thing for these players to go and play grassroots and go and play for their local teams?
Yes, of course, there is lots of grassroots program, but most of, I don't want to say all, because some academies are doing well. Some coaches have the right intentions, but generally, these when you even at the grassroots level, it's very competitive. So the first thing they highlight is the winning, rather than developing the players' ability, and this is the major gap. There is lots of support from the parents. There is lots of support from the federation. The federation is doing a great job in organizing grassroots event, and they've been very creative in the way they're trying to promote the game and give the right platform for the clubs to use. But then it goes back to the coaches at the club level as well, and the clubs themselves.
The first coaching role that you had was being the head coach of Monza University, I believe, over in Australia. And you're working with them for around a year, I believe, 2005 it was in. What did you learn then in that first managerial step? Why did you decide that the coaching route was for you?
Well, as I mentioned, because I want to be involved in football, and because I always was like a player who's more into thinking than physical, like more creative. As I used to play as a number 10, and I used to look at football as a puzzle or as a chess game. And I have lots of positive feedback from my colleagues and from my coaches who coached me that you should become a coach. So, and then after I couldn't make it as a player, this is where I decided. I chose the first year to coach women's team because one of the instructors back then in Australia told me, if you want to develop your communication skills, the best thing to start is coaching women, because you need to communicate in a very good way. You need to be able to explain the why, because always they ask questions, always they want to know. They are curious about the information and keen to improve. But with the men, generally, you tell them to do something, they just go and do it. So always you need to consider their psychological status. So all that, it will improve you as a coach.
In America,
I experienced.
In America, I know it's different to Australia, but America are really keen on university teams, whether it be playing or coaching. They have a lot of facilities for these players, boys or girls. Is that the same in Australia? Did you have a lot of facilities to use and a lot of players at your disposal?
Well, in America, I'm not that experienced about what's going on over there, but I'm sure that the facility, from what I see, is exceptionally good. In Australia, they had at Monash University, we had a very good facilities, from gym, from sports facility. The sports sector over there was quite good, but the football players, they didn't have much access on that sector, because over there, football league in Australia is amateur, comparing to the United States, which is more competitive than Australia, and it's organized. It have different levels, different leagues. Over in Australia, they don't. But they back then, Monash University was in state 2. So you have state 2, state 1, and then you go to NPL, so you can play as a club.
And these players that you could only choose from, were they just at the university? You couldn't choose out of anyone else?
Yes, correct. And that's the difference, yeah. And you can't bring players on scholarship like the United States.
Yes.
So whoever is in the university, they play. That's it.
South Melbourne Women FC was up next. You stayed there from February of 2006 to September of 2006, and you played in the equivalent of their Premier League. How did that move come about then, from a university team to now, I believe, like a decent, proper setup?
Because I saw the level at the university wasn't competitive enough for what I want to be involved on, even though I took a big step to just move there. But in parallel with the universities, in the opposite season, there used to be a junior league for the under 13s and under 14s, and this is where I used to work in the off season of the university with Bentley Greens, and I gained the experience, and I made sure I worked hard enough to just make that step to go to South Melbourne, where I started as a assistant coach, and then I moved as a senior coach. But then I thought, okay, I got now what I want to move back to the men's game. So I had the opportunity.
What is the setup in Australia like? Because we all know that the men's side of the game, there's no promotion or relegation. Is that the same? Is that the same to the women's? Is there things that are holding these teams back?
I didn't exactly get Jamie. What's your question
The question is,
regarding the moment? Yeah.
the question is, what's holding the game in Australia back? Because it's not widely spoken about in Europe. It's not widely spoken about really anywhere in the world. Would you put that down towards it's not competitive because there's no promotional relegations? There's not enough players that are going over there from European leagues?
That's one thing. I haven't followed the game in Australia since I moved here in 2014. So it's like almost 1 decade. So I'm sure now things have changed. But back then, again, the one league division, it wasn't competitive enough. And what happened back then that once the Dutch Federation took over, there was an encouragement on the 1-4-3-3 system and the possession game, and everyone adopted that style of play. And so you can see that the level back then starts to improve, and the understanding of the system starts to improve. But then most of the clubs start to play this kind of football, and then it was challenging back then to play against other systems. So this is as well one of the reason. And then the same problem that we had here in Lebanon, I faced it in Australia, and that was the talent identification process. The talent identification process, again, you look at most of the teams, they want the big, tall, fast players who run fast and score at the end of the week. And there was a big winning mentality, and this is a positive thing. It has its advantage, but it has as well its disadvantage when you look at the youngest, skinny, technical, creative player that couldn't have the chance to participate or be part of the team because the selection wasn't the intention of this selection was different.
From July 2006 to January 2007, you worked with boys and girls teams in futsal, doing the head coach work. Yeah. Futsal is a game which is played by a few, but not a lot in England. And maybe in Australia it could be different. But what we all know is that the footwork of players really drastically improves when you start to play futsal. It's a smaller pitch. It can be played inside and outside. What is the difference like between futsal and football in terms of developing these players?
Well, you put these players, it's like when you're playing in small-sided games. The ground is different. The game is faster. So the player, when they stick the area and the time of the player, you're improving the decision-making and and the way they handle the ball under pressure, the way they think fast to create space. It was interesting for me to have these couple of years experience, because while I was coaching the state futsal team, I was coaching the state outdoor team. And I have some players in common that they played both. I was curious to know about futsal because I wanted to take some of the futsal rotation, whether in defending or in attacking, to football. And the challenge for me, how I can adapt this kind of rotation to the football game.
What do you prefer? Do you prefer futsal or football?
Oh, definitely football. Yeah.
And why would that be? Would it be because of a certain rule? Would it be because it's more publicized to play football?
No, your passion is in football, and I grew up playing football. Small-sided games was fun. When we want to just have fun, every now and again we used to play it. Definitely futsal. It's every single moment there is an opportunity to score a goal, and it keep you up on your feet. And the way when you coach futsal, you cannot just sit down and think and then reflect on what you can do. You have to quickly think as well as a coach. So that's one part, while in football you have the time to reflect, and the way you communicate with players is completely different. But I'm sure that both games they contribute to your development as a coach, and futsal, I think it contributed to my knowledge and development as a football coach as well at some part of my career.
The next 4 years, you worked with countless more clubs, playing and coaching in several different countries. But Atletico Mineiro is a huge team that we just can't get away from. 2007 to 2010, you worked with them. 3 months per year, you analysed the pro team for an internship, observed fitness, analysed youth teams. You were in and out the club, analysing everything that they did. Why?
Because I had the opportunity to do so. And because I had the chance, and this chance didn't come twice, and it was like they were doing like an exchange program, and they were happy to have a English spoken coach with the players because they just want to make sure that these players are getting used to an English coach communicating with them. So when they understand English and these players want to move to Europe, their process is much easier. So it was a win-win situation for both sides. So this is where I started getting my work experience and getting more exposed to what they do in Brazil, and it was very interesting for me when I saw the difference between the two states in Rio de Janeiro and Belo Horizonte and Minas Gerais. It was as if you are in complete two different countries.
What did you learn in Brazil? Because everyone knows the players are a lot more technical on paper. Neymar, Ronaldinho, Pele, these great players of the game. Did you like your time in Brazil? Did it really open your eye up to anything?
Yeah, definitely, of course. The way they play, it reflects the way they live, because they are so relaxed. They are very optimistic people, very happy. So they enjoy life, and they enjoy the way they play as well. This is one thing. The pool of talent is like it's incredible. The millions of players plays football, and Atletico Mineiro, they used to have an access of open trials for more than 3,000 players per year to choose maybe between 8 or 12 players from them. So imagine the amount of talent that these guys have over there. And then you see what football means to them. Football for them is like a religion. It's like a way of transformation in their lifestyle. So some of these kids, the only way to get out of poverty is just to become a football player. So they are ready to give anything they can. In Brazil, there is more focus on the development of the player at an individual level. So they individualize their periodization. Part of their football training as a purely functional based on the position of every player, and they give more time according if you want to compare it in Europe. So during my time there, the average of we calculated the average of Brazilian clubs, how much they train at a club level, and you have between the under 13 all the way up to the under 20, the players will get around 4,050 hours of coaching. If you want to compare it to Lebanon, it's 760 hours. So there is more than 3,000 hours of quality coaching at the club level, and there is much more competitive game as well at a much higher level. So can you imagine the difference? Plus the pool of talent is big and huge. So in England, maybe it's a little bit less, the average of coaching, and that as well, it will show you why players over there are more comfortable. This is one thing. And if you look at the lifestyle is dancing, samba, and so this as well, it will give an excellent coordination for their body, for their movements, for the way they handle the ball. It's like they are dancing with the ball. This is one thing at an individual level. The way they play the game over there, of course, they cannot play it like they do in England. because in England the weather is cold, so they cannot play the same way, the same rhythm that when they play in South America. So they have to be, the game will go like indirectly faster, while in South America it's too hot, so they cannot play in the same rhythm. It will be challenging for them to play in the same rhythm like they do in England. So this is where you see the change of tempo over there.
What club setups work better then? Do you like the Brazilian setup, or do you like you've worked with Chelsea, do you like the setup of England?
Well, in Chelsea, it was back then when Coach Abram was there, I think, after Mourinho left the first time. And in Chelsea, it's more sophisticated comparing to Brazil. But in Brazil, it's all what you need. So you feel in Chelsea, it was like more as a serious setup. In Brazil, it was like players are there, they're having all what they want, but it's not as sophisticated as in Chelsea. And in Brazil, they have around 200 players who lived on the premises of Galo City in Atlético Mineiro. So the players are there for 10 months. They train in the morning, they train in the afternoon. So it was a little bit different than Chelsea. But when we talk about the quality of the facility, of course, Chelsea was exceptional. And the thing that captured my attention is that when I was doing my work experience with the under 14 in Chelsea, there was 9 starting African players on the team. But then the question is, what's the average success between these two clubs? Like, how many players from the under 14s will continue and make it to the top level, while in Brazil, how many players will continue from the under 14s and make it to the top level? And this is even though in Brazil the clubs have more options because of the numbers that they have in the country, while in England they don't have as much options as they do have in Brazil. Especially in England, if you find a good technical player, you cannot bring them because of the visa. Back then in Brazil, there was no problem before they changed the visa rules. So if a player is good, he can come and stay over there.
Brazil's punctuality on paper isn't too good. On social media, I follow a lot of footballers, and one that's come on here, Hamid Babali, he's often criticising, because he's a professional player in Brazil, he's often criticising the fact that a lot of players are turning up 1 minute before training starts. He was about 15 minutes early, which in European terms is decently normal. He says that players are turning up very late. Training's never scheduled. Players are not getting paid. There's always a problem in Brazil. What do you say as a coach when players aren't getting paid, when players are turning up late for training? What do you as a coach do, and how do you understand what's going on?
So he said that the players aren't getting paid?
Yes.
Okay. Well, it goes back to the culture of the club and the values that you set and it has to be these values understood from every single person, and I agreed on, especially from the president all the way to the people who take care of the pitches. Okay, so once you set the right values, and you set the accepted and non-accepted behavior, I think you have much less problems when it comes to these. In Brazil, that's why I told you in Rio de Janeiro is different than Belo Horizonte, and we're talking about the culture. In Rio de Janeiro, they are too relaxed. So if the training, they say they start at 5, it may start at 6:30. In Belo Horizonte, they are so punctual, and there is no mess around. And the more you go south in Brazil, you see that European culture, because there is lots of Germans over there. There is lots of people who migrated from Europe to Brazil, and they reside in south of Brazil because the climate is not as hot as north of Brazil. In north of Brazil, it's like more the African climate, the African way of life, which is, as I said, too relaxed, too easy. And this will make a big difference.
As a coach, though, if your players are turning up late for training, and I don't know, training's meant to start at 5, it starts at 6:30, That's not great for anyone who's coming in to look at a club to think, I want to sign here, I want to play the rest of my career out here. It's not a great look for Brazilian football. Does that change? Is it changing? Because for Europeans to go over there, it's a big change in that department in itself.
Well, definitely, it goes back, first of all, to the coach, to the head coach. It goes back to the decision makers at the club level. Because I'll give you an example. When we have the economical crisis, which now we still do, but we had a big economical crisis during COVID and after COVID. Sometimes there's 1 week you can't fill up your car with petrol, and some players they couldn't get where they want, but because they had the desire and because we set the rules and we tried as much as we can to give them like transportation, like money for their transport. I'm talking to you about the national team level. You see that these players were probably 99% committed. For those, our message was for those who expect to be late, do not come to train. If you are going to be late, say that you are going to be late, but we don't want anyone showing up to training late. So it's all about the rules and values that you set in this in the culture of your club or in your team.
There was a lot of criticism of Arne Slot, the new Liverpool manager, in pre-season, where we had a young Klopp prior to him where he was hugging players. He was a bit more of a friend. Arne Slot likes the barrier in between players where you shake your hand, well done for playing. What, as a player, but also as a coach, would you like? What do you prefer? Because as the coach, would you like to enforce that you're the coach and no one can go above you? Or do you like the communal atmosphere of players thinking that you're friends and you should get on fine?
Well, we are now the new generation. You can't treat them the way we were treated, because life is changing. Social media is moving on so fast. What I personally like, once I step on the park and on the pitch, I'm the coach, they are the players. So I always tell my players, in the training, you are to me elite players. Outside of the training, you are humans. And this is the challenge, is to make the right balance between understanding that we are humans, but we need to perform. Okay, I can be friend, listen to them, and show empathy, but I cannot let them cross some lines. So I always have to remind them, okay, I'm your coach and you're still my players. But again, being friendly, being down to earth, being humble is very important, because this will allow you to create a bond between you and between the players. And the players, if they trust you and they feel comfortable with you, they will give you. If there is like sort of boundaries between you and between your players, then you can't access their mind, and you cannot show them the idea or the images and transform it to them and make them see it the way you are seeing it as well. So I think it should be balanced, not too friendly and not too strict.
Yui Cornella was up next in September of 2010 to March 2011. You were the youth team coach over there, but you also had good experiences coaching against Barcelona, Espanyol, Europa FC, some really good teams within Europe's youth academy systems. What was these players like coming through? Because obviously, at the age of 15, 16, if that was the age that you were managing at, they're not yet fully professional. They're not yet in the professional build, but they're still decent enough players.
I was working with the under 14s, with the Infantil A. These players were exceptionally smart, very smart players. The football is big part of their culture. And now the way you see that their level of understanding the game it's like you were coaching senior players in Australia or in Lebanon. So their understanding to the time and space was surprisingly to me, and that gave me joy to work with them. And it will stretch your knowledge as a coach, because the more you give, the more these players take. So you enjoy coaching them. They are very quick decision makers, and they are not that far from players who play in Barcelona or Espanyol, because back then this year we finished second behind Espanyol and one spot in front of FC Barcelona.
There's been a lot of stick in the last few years of Brazilian players and that American kid by, I think the name's Sullivan, 14-year-old, who's now signed a professional contract in Manchester City. That is ridiculous to be able to have a 14-year-old on a professional deal. There's also been a lot of stick around Endrick moving to Real Madrid and criticising the Brazilian football structure where he made his professional debut at the age of 14. Are we ruining our young players coming through the academies by playing them so early, putting so much pressure on them, and then they get a career-ending injury, they don't live up to the hype that's been set around them, but also social media, because Sullivan's got 500,000 followers at the age of 14.
Yes, I agree. That definitely will shift the focus of the players and their intention why they are there in the game, because these players are still young, they still need to enjoy the game and stay at their not at their comfort zone, but around their family, around their friends, till they start to get developed. If you tell me, okay, as a 17 you move, or as a 14 you move there with your family, all your family are there with you, okay, it might be acceptable. At an age of 17 you start moving, considering a move, yes, but have you played enough at the senior level in your country? Have you get matured? Have you get managed properly to how to deal with fame, how to deal with money before you start making this move? Because most of these players, as we've spoken before, they come from poverty, and then out of a sudden they have millions in between their hands. So that's, for a normal person, it's very hard and difficult to deal with. So what can imagine how it's like to be with a youngster who's playing football, who have lots of expectations to perform, and then having millions of fans, having millions of dollars in their hand. So definitely, I believe that's why you're not seeing the next Ronaldo, Ronaldinho, or because these players are moving, are changing culture too early. They are changing habits too early. They are their whole life is completely changing. So it's challenging. This, I'm not saying that they will not make it, but it will be very challenging for them to make it.
It's certainly harder for them to make it pro now than it would have been 10 or 15 years ago without Instagram, TikTok, etc., because there's so much pressure on these players. Barcelona, you were at for 3 months in 2011. You studied the module of Barcelona, and I want you to tell us what the word module meant in Barcelona's terms, because we all know what a great club they are. They've fallen off in the last few years, but they've still been a great club throughout the years. So what does module mean when you were going there and looking at the way that they did training and routines, etc.?
Well, for me back then, everything at Barcelona looked smart, because they focus a lot on the intelligent factor of the player, of course, as well as they had back then a good sports science department. You look at the injury rate of the first team during that time, and you barely hear players that having a muscular problem or a serious injury. I like the way they played the game, and I'm a fan of this style of play. That's why I worked hard to get that chance to do a work experience over there with different categories, and had the chance to observe the national team. Not the first team. Over there, the concept, we as coaches, before we think about, and there's other schools, the normal schools, you consider and talk about the line, the 4-3-3, the 1-4-4, 4-4-2, etc. Okay, over there, their focus is where is the ball, and it's their formation, their style of play is around the ball, not basically around the lines. So with their model, they focus a lot about the socio-affective of the players. So the players, they understand each other, they understand their capability, and based on that, they plan their game. So, for example, if you look at Dembele or Dama Traore when he used to play there, when they try to isolate these players, they don't go and support. They just leave these players for a 1v1 situation, and every player is a little bit away from them. It's completely different when you have players like Torres. So some players, they go to him to play combinational, or if David Villa, for example, is there, they get closer to him to play a combinational game of in order to attack. So they study a lot, and they give lots of attention to the football socio part on the part. There is a lot of terms that's different than a little bit different than what we learn in general about football. And for example, let's say they divide the park into 3 zones: the intervention space, the corporation, the mutual space, and the corporation zone. So these 3 zones, what's the role of these players and how they manage these zones, the way their philosophy of defending, the way they take set pieces. So everything is mental, is creative. So that was very interesting to me back then. And this is where, what you like the most at FC Barcelona, what you like the most with the Italian model, and what you like the most with the Dutch and the Brazilian model, and how these affected you as a coach, and you put them together to try to do your own model.
That's really interesting that you mentioned about Barcelona. And obviously, being the professional coach that you are and having so much experience in the game, I just want to ask, evidently in the last few years, Barcelona haven't been at the best. They've won the league, but they haven't been having the star names that we're so used to seeing. They've had Oriol Romeu from Southampton, for example, not great players. For a club that did things so perfectly, from the sports scientists to the way that they turned up, the way that they presented themselves on a global scale, why and how would a football club want to change that dynamic, and how did that change?
Well, it was interesting. I remember once Dembele said something that every time I come back from injury, they introduced me to a new coach. So it happened that there was lots of changes in Barcelona, and these changes, it goes back to the instability at a admin and executive level over there. And this as well, they still facing lots of financial and economical crisis. So this as well affected the culture of the club. It affected the decision making that when they took in bringing coaches and signing players and keeping players. So it affected definitely that. And then again, if we want to be realistic, every club, they go into a roller coaster. So sometimes you are up, and then sometimes you need to go down in order to move up again. And this way, and during this time, when Xavi came, as you see, he promoted lots of young players, and they start believing in their own players, in the La Masia players, and then they go. And it happened that at some stages, Barca brought players that they are not similar, or they didn't fit in their model and the way they played. And the club at some stages, they start almost losing their identity, the way they play. So I believe it's just a phase. And now if we look at Barcelona and we see the numbers of players that they came out from the La Masia and from the young team, I think they still consider to be the best in Europe. But it's a matter of competing financially with the clubs like Real Madrid and Manchester City.
Of course, and Real Madrid reached £1 billion in revenue, and that is just insane for a football club. So, yeah. Of course, Real Madrid are years ahead of Barcelona as we currently speak. Before we talk about your time with Lebanon and being the women's national team manager, you were the technical director of Bentley Greens from February 2012 to June 2013, and then there was a 6-year period until the Lebanon job where you were working on coaching courses and giving out advice to players and coaches. At your time at Bentley Greens, you monitored training and performance of players. But what does a technical director do day to day? Is it just going around the facilities, making sure everyone's in shape? And that, if it is, sounds like a really important role for a football club.
Yes, back then I was responsible for the under 14s and below, because back then the club decided to have 2 technical directors, under 15 and above, and then under 14 and below. I took this job as a challenge for me, because in the off season, I think I was coaching, I can't remember. I was, I think, coaching still at the Australian football school, maybe. I've done lots of coaches. I can't now remember. But at Bantry Greens, when I did the role of a technical director, it was very similar to what I was working with the Australian football school. It's like putting a model that fits and that suited the players and the needs and the goals of the club, and just make sure that these players are developed technically, and making sure that the coaches are following with their training the expectations of the club according to the football model that we agreed on. So you monitor the coach's performance, the team's performance, the players' development, and the tryouts of these players. So it's a little bit different role. But personally, for me, I enjoy more to be on the ground as a coach.
What training methods do you prefer then? And also, what style of club do you like? Because you mentioned that, I forgot the name that you used, but when you were at the club, you wanted to work on a specific, what was it? Specific? You mentioned about wanting to have the football club in a certain way.
Yeah.
What way is the best way?
There is nothing the best way in football. It's just a matter of opinion because it's subjective when we want to choose the best way, because otherwise everybody will be working in the same methods. But for me personally, I prefer that majorly everything would be with the ball. To a certain extent, yes, the gym is and the weight training is good for the players to develop their technique using weight, and to maximize their power and their speed at a certain point to prevent injury. It's important. But then when it comes to football, I like the holistic approach where you can coach tactics and the football fitness together. Okay, so I'm a fan of this methodology. That the players needs to be creative, they need to think, they have to be very disciplined, but in some areas you need to give the players their freedom to be creative and to express themselves, because by the end of the day, they are the one who's making decisions during the game and not us as coaches.
Lebanon came up next for the women's national team in January of 2017 until February 2022. A lot happened in this time. You moved up 5 places in the rankings after you beat the UAE and Guam, but you failed to reach the 2022 Women's Asian Cup. However, it was Lebanon's most successful qualification campaign, winning 2 out of 3 games, as in 2014 they only managed 1. Going into the Lebanon job, what was the expectations for you and for the country?
Well, the expectation was realistic because the gap is big. Because if you look at those teams who makes it every single time to the Women's Asian Cup, the 12 teams, they are almost the same teams. So, and that's tell you that there is a big gap between the second best and the best 12, those who are there. Because you have the top 3 are waiting in the Asian Cup. They don't play qualifications. You have the host country. It could change every single year. And then you have countries like China, Chinese Taipei, Vietnam, Thailand, Philippines. And these countries, they've already have qualified to the World Cup, part of Chinese Taipei. And then you have Korea, South Korea, Japan, Australia. So Uzbekistan now is developing in a rapid way. So our challenge back then, how much further we can get, okay, how much we can stretch as a limit. And it happened that we played against Myanmar. I believe that we're still behind Myanmar, but back then in that game, I remember that we managed to hold the first 35 minutes, not conceded any goal. And they gave them a penalty, which was a little bit like a harsh decision, but again, that's football. And then we thought, okay, we just want to make sure that it's very hard to get back into the game because the level of fitness between our players and their football ability between them. So we thought, okay, we need to focus on the next 2 games against Emirates and Guam, and we managed to do so. Now our challenge is to make sure that how much further we can get. And if we play with teams like Chinese Taipei, Myanmar, maybe, or Iran, or maybe you have the chance to compete and go further. But then what we have to do to bridge this gap, this is the question. Back then, our national team average age was 19.8. That was the average age. And if you look at Myanmar and other countries, it's like above 26 or 27. And if you look at the football age of these players, some of our players have started playing football by the age of 12. Now it's a little bit different. We have an older football age. So some players have started playing now at the age of 8 and 7 years old. So our expectations is growing as for the national team. As we said, we are aiming to increase the participation in order to increase the pool of talent. We are trying now to target the diaspora players who have Lebanese background and Lebanese parents who are playing at the top league to bring them to strengthen the squad. And this is what we're trying to do now, as well as trying to promote players at the national team level to go and play outside. So we already have 5 players now playing, 3 in France, 1 in Saudi Arabia, and we have another 2 in the United States. So it's 6 players who are go. And I'm sure when these players come back, they will help with their experience the national team players, and it will give a challenge for the youngsters to do all their best and to fight to get their spot in the national team. While back then, it was so easy. So anyone who can play, almost, they can be part of the national team. So now the standards and the criteria is starting to become more challenging.
In the next few years, then, what would you see the Lebanese national team, men and women? Do you see them improving on the international stage? Do you see them playing against England in friendlies and starting to really boost their reputation?
In the next 2 years, I don't think so. I hope, but we have to be realistic. Maybe in probably 6-8 years' time, yes, if we manage and if the security and economical situation over here allowed us to do so, definitely this will happen by time. But in the next 2 years, I see a big leap and improvement in the women's national team. Because at the men's national team, the investment is huge and the demands are big in order to compete with the countries, with the GCC countries that's around you. So we need to think about the league. We need to restructure the league. At the men's level, the club, they need to operate as a structured organization, not demanding on one person or one decision maker who's bringing all the money to the club and from the club. And this affects the whole culture and the dynamics of the club. At the women's, as we spoke before, our plan is to collaborate with the development program in collaboration with the AFC, FIFA, and UEFA in order to push this game forward and to improve the game at a local level and at a national team level as well.
We're slowly but shortly running out of time, but let's just talk about your time at Ittihad Club in Jordan, where it was the most recent job that you've had as the head coach and technical director. Sorry, the second most recent job. And in the first 3 rounds of the league, you tore it apart, 17 goals and only 2 conceded. You beat Al Nassr, Al-Ittihad and Oman FC by some really big scorelines, 2 of those with 7 goals scored. Only 2 yellow cards, and the Lebanese striker, Leila Isaacanda, 7 goals and 2 assists. You were tearing the league apart. However, fans, ever since you came in, were telling everyone that you addressed some previous mistakes and some errors that were made by some players in the previous coaching staff. What were the errors like, and why were they that bad that you had to change them?
Errors has made by previous coaching staff.
Yes, and just errors in general that were made by previous players.
It's not basically errors. It could be some habits. I think there was a misinterpretation with that because when you come and try to change the habits of the players from taking the game as a hobby at some stage, okay, while they're thinking that they are professional, and then increasing the expectations and asking for them for more commitment, sometimes it will take time for these players to gel in. But this is one of the challenges that we had in the first year as a staff and as a club. But then after the second year, they start to get up. Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. It did
Yes.
cut out there.
Yeah. I think the connection. I lost the connection. So yeah, in the first year we had challenges when it comes to rules and regulations between us as a coaching staff and as a players. New coach coming in, new expectations. The club has big expectations, and they were very ambitious. And they have a vision to make it to the Asian Champions League and the West Asian Club Championship, and the dynamics of the first year, it didn't match the expectations of the club, so we had to work harder in order to choose that. But that I think it was a very good experience for me, and it was challenging at the same time, moving as well to a different culture, dealing with different players, different mentalities. But it was enjoyable.
And last but not least, now you're back with Lebanon.
Yeah.
What is the plan with them? Would you want to stay with them for a few more years, then go into another club and coach there? And if so, what does the future hold for you?
Well, it's very hard to predict, but definitely after my plan is to go now to the qualifications in 2025 and to see how further we can get. I have a good belief with the way we are playing, targeting new diaspora players. The federation is investing a lot in the women's game, and they believe that we can do something in women's football. So it will keep us motivated. And being a national team coach, I have as well enough time to finish other projects that I'm working on. And after it will be depending on where I will be next by the end of the 2025 in order to decide for my next level. I have a few plans that I'm taking into consideration, which I only will know when I get there, because as you know, the life of a football coach sometimes it's
busy,
it's unpredictable. Yeah.
Well, Gharzeddine, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you for an hour about your whole journey in Australia and beyond, in Brazil, working with Barcelona, Chelsea, and so much more. And I thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for your time, Jamie. It was a pleasure as well talking to you. Thank you.